Rise of Kingdoms YouTube is flooded with commander tier lists or best legendary investment videos. While they all are very helpful for you to decide if you should invest on a commander or not, it is always best to know how to evaluate a commander by yourself, and then you can use those videos just to confirm or double check your decision. And for that, I put together a comprehensive list of every factor that you should take into account when deciding if a commander is great, decent, or bad for your account. Now, before we start talking about the list, there is one thing you should understand about commander evaluation. Some commanders might be incredible for others, but simply a waste for you. And this depends on two main things. Number one is your current lineup, and number two, your role/purpose. If you're, let's say, just getting into Season of Conquest and the only endgame commander you have is Expertise Liu Che, William Wallace could be a great investment for you. His kit is not necessarily better than Scipio Prime, but him and Liu Che together work so well. They both deal smite damage, they amplify the normal damage, which also increases the smite damage, etc. However, if you already have, let's say, an Expertise Scipio or an Expertise Alexander the Great, and if you are specifically using one infantry march, then you should probably skip William Wallace because the upgrade will be minimal, if any, and it certainly does not worth 690 legendary sculpture investment. Regarding your role/purpose, Prime Belisarius could be a great example. For average field fighters, which is like 95% of players, he's an easy skip. But for the remaining 5%, he's amazing. And that's because the role of those players. Prime Belly is amazing for swarm situations, whether it's a rally, flag, fort, or even for open field as well, if you can consistently unlock your 6th and 7th marches. Because the more marches you have, the more benefit you get from Belisarius when the target is swarmed. But average players like us do not swarm structures or rallies, and they cannot unlock their 6th or 7th march early and consistently, and even if they can, they won't have a great gear or armaments for those extra marches. And because of that, you should simply skip Prime Belisarius. Now that concept is out of the way, let's start discussing everything we have on the list. Starting with the most obvious one, it is the high damage factor. Preferably, you want AoE damage because open field fighting is all about big murder balls. And in big murder balls, all enemy marches are going to be super close to each other, and you will usually deal more damage. The best type of AoE is of course 5-target circular like YSG, Zhuge etc. Of course, how much damage the skill deals, is it 5-target AoE or a 3-target AoE, these are important, but generally, if a commander has an AoE damage active skill, it is a big plus. The second one on the list is buff/debuff. Buffing your marches are always super nice, whether it's increasing the tankiness or the damage of them, but I believe debuffing the enemy marches are way more crucial. The reason is when you debuff the enemy, it benefits all other marches on the field. For example, if a commander increases the damage of your march for, let's say, 15%, it is great. But if it was increasing the damage taken off the enemy march by 15%, it will be way better because it's not limited to your marches. All armies hitting those debuff targets will deal 15% increased damage, which will be more beneficial for the whole murder ball. So if a commander has buffs, it's a plus. But if it has good debuffs such as increased damage taken, reduced health, etc., it is a big plus. The third one on the list is damage mitigation/tankiness. Of course, for you to be able to deal a lot of damage on the field, you need to be able to survive in the first place. And for that, damage mitigation plays a huge role. It could be normal damage taken reduction, because it also reduces the smite damage that you are going to take. It could be skill damage taken reduction, since there are way more skill damage pairings on the field compared to smite damage, or it could just be straight up taking less damage. There are a lot of commanders in Rise of Kingdoms that deal a huge amount of damage, but since they don't have the tankiness, they don't have the survivability, most people don't invest on them. Because another downside is your enemy is also aware of the fact that the commander that you are using is extremely squishy, so they are going to target you first. The fourth thing on the list kind of goes hand in hand with tankiness/damage mitigation, and it is raw stats. The more stats a commander has is always better, and preferably you want health, defense, and then attack. The reason is attack is such a saturated stat, especially in Season of Conquest, because it is everywhere in the crystal technology. And from stats in Rise of Kingdoms, you get diminishing returns. After a certain point, the return that you are going to get from increasing that stat is going to be lower and lower. And that's why open field commanders who does provide defense and HP is always valuable. And the next one on the list can be considered as a stat, but it's a little bit different. And that is the movement speed. Regardless of the power of the marches that you are using, if you have no mobility, you are going to suffer. The reason why mobility is important is because number one, when your marches are in a bad situation, in a bad position, you can retreat them back pretty fast with minimum number of hospital bills if they are fast. But if they are not, it's going to cost you a lot of resources because most likely your marches will get sad-faced. And on the opposite side of things, when the enemy marches are in a bad position and they are trying to retreat, if you have the movement speed, you will be able to stick to them and deal as much damage as possible. But if they are faster than you, most likely they will be able to get away. So you may not be able to see the benefit of movement speed when you take a look at the reports, how much damage you deal or how much damage you take, but trust me, when you have high movement speed compared to no movement speed, your overall gaming experience for field fighting is going to improve so much. And that's why, for example, people go for iconic tier 5 boots first just because it gives extra movement speed, or infantry open field players usually build 4 pieces set just because it gives 10% extra movement speed bonus, even though KVK weapon and KVK helm gives way more stats. So movement speed on a commander is extremely crucial. Next, we're going to talk about the new commander synergy with the existing commander / the murder balls. Because Lilith might release an amazing commander, but if it doesn't pair well with existing commanders for that troop type, it's going to be useless because your marches consist 2 commanders, and the better synergy they have, the better they'll perform. And that's why, for example, even though Scipio Prime as a commander by itself is, I think, better than William Wallace, I will still invest on William Wallace on my restart account because he just works so well. He pairs so well with Liu Che and they have amazing synergy due to smite damage. Or let's say if they release an archer commander who is able to double cast its active skill just like Joan of Arc, it will have an amazing synergy with Ashurbanipal because when your March uses an active skill, Ash gets so many bonuses. And that's why when you are evaluating a commander's power, or if you are trying to decide should you invest or not, you have to consider the synergy of it with the existing commanders. Unless you're a huge Kraken, you will unfortunately not have unlimited sculptures in Rise of Kingdoms. And because of that reason, commanders that do work really well with low investment is always a great option for free-to-plays and low spenders. Let's take a look at Joan of Arc Prime, for example. Her second skill is okay. Third skill is not that impressive, and expertise is, I would say, alright. But her first skill and the fourth skill are so good, if you manage to get her to 5-1-1-5, or if you have some extra sculptures and get her to 5-5-1-5, she's almost 85 to 90% completed, and the return of your investment is going to be so good. Or another cavalry commander, William I. The reason why a lot of free-to-plays and low spenders did invest on William is because he's again, just like Joan of Arc, 90% completed when he is 5-5-5-1, which is again only 390 sculpture investment. So on top of all these factors that you see on the screen right now, the cost of a commander, the usability with low investment of it, is super important for free-to-plays and low spenders. Yes, in the end, you can of course expertise that commander if you want to, but being able to use them as soon as possible, as soon as you get them to 5-5-1-1, 5-5-1-5, whatever the configuration is just an amazing thing, and that's why the cost of a commander is something you have to consider. Last but not least, we have the commander shelf life. Let's take Scipio Prime and William Wallace again as an example. With the latest generation of infantry commanders, we can clearly see that Lilith is pushing infantry to normal damage and smite damage. And that's why I said, for example, if the only infantry commander you have is Liu Che, or you don't have any infantry commander and you are going to invest soon, you should consider William Wallace over Scipio Prime, even though Scipio is the better commander, just because infantry is moving towards all smite damage and normal damage. Because yes, William Wallace is not the best commander, just because there is a higher chance that Wallace will be more pairable with the future infantry commanders due to again smite damage, my investment choice between the two would be William Wallace instead of Scipio Prime. And that concludes our commander evaluation checklist. Let me know in the comment section down below if we missed anything. Subscribe for more Rise of Kingdoms videos. I see you on the next one.